back in the 1970s, America's and Europe's ruling classes struck a deal. I call it a dark deal after the fall of the Bretton Woods system. It's not a complicated deal to understand. This dark deal is based on America's ever-increasing trade deficit. The trade deficit of the United States operated like a vacuum cleaner that sucked into the United States Mercedes-Benz-es, Siemens products, the net exports of Germany, of France, of Italy, of Japan, and later of China. Focusing on Europe and Germany. Germany's capitalists depended on the American trade deficit for profits denominated in dollars. But they couldn't spend those dollars in Europe. So they sent them back to Wall Street. So every Mercedes-Benz that went over to the United States brought dollars to Germany, and then those dollars went to Wall Street to buy shares, to purchase real estate in California and Miami, and of course to lend to the American government. Now that's the dark deal. America is keeping German capitalists rich and European capitalists rich as long as they send their dollar profits to America to fund the American state, to keep Wall Street liquid, and to keep American rentiers in luxury. And to continue to be dollar rich, German capitalists needed the euro to plunder poorer Europeans, like the Greeks, the Portuguese, and so on. But they don't want the euro to be dominant. They want the euro, but not as a dominant currency. Because, why? They don't want the euro to compete with the dollar, since their profits depend on the dollar's exorbitant privilege. You see why? Because their exports depend on America's trade deficit. And America's trade deficit can only be maintained if the dollar is the dominant currency. Now, this is why Europe's ruling class will back any war demanded by the United States military-industrial complex. And that's perhaps the darkest aspect of this dark deal between American and German, or more generally, Northern European or European capitalists. So we begin to see why Europe's ruling class condoned things that damaged themselves. Took Nord Stream 1. We now know who blew it up. And it wasn't the Russians, it was the Americans. It was the American military that blew up Nord Stream 1. And the German authorities know that. They know this very well. Now, by blowing up Nord Stream 1, they inflicted the Americans a gigantic cost on German industrialists. And the German industrialists know that. So the question is, why are they not complaining? Well, they're not complaining because German industrialists need America's deficits to line their pockets with dollars, which they can then take to the United States to invest. So even though they were not happy that America, the armed forces of the United States, the Pentagon, the United States government, inflicted that huge cost on them, energy cost, by blowing up Nord Stream 1, what could they say? They were vassals of the United States, and in particular, of the dollar profits that they got from the American trade deficit. So is it any wonder that they show allegiance to the Atlantic's other side? Is it any wonder that when America seized upon Putin's cruel invasion to fuel a never-ending war, Europe's rulers rolled over? It is why Europe's ruling class, our oligarchs, would even send their own children to war, to the trenches to be slaughtered, or imprison them if they dare protest in our universities. Their hypocrisy is mind-numbing. They say they do not want debt, especially common debt, but they bend over backwards to produce debt for themselves and for their brethren. If it comes, when, for instance, Olaf Scholz is proclaiming that he will spend $100 billion on American weaponry. They say that they hate the money tree. They're too scared of hyperinflation. They don't want the money tree to be plucked, but they pluck it energetically when it comes to spending billions on weapons or lining the pockets of the financiers who transport their dollar profits from Frankfurt to Wall Street. They scream blue murder when Ukrainians are invaded, when the Ukrainian land is occupied, when the hospitals in Mariupol are flattened, rightly so. But they consider exactly the same thing absolutely justifiable homicide when the invaders wear Israeli uniforms in Gaza or the West Bank or East Jerusalem. Don't forget East Jerusalem. They also liken Putin to Hitler. You know my view about Putin. I think he's a criminal. But they liken Putin to Hitler to argue against a peace process that involves Russia because they want the Ukrainians to continue fighting forever, dying forever, with weapons that they buy from them. This hypocrisy is not only a moral insult to the direct victim of war and genocide in Palestine, Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, Kashmir, it is also a clear and present danger for our people, here in Berlin, in Athens, across Europe. Lies and orchestrated industrial-scale hypocrisy is the starting point of internal tyranny and external wars. We need to expose it to save our people from despotism, poverty, and the insecurity warmongering that they are trying to cultivate, and they are cultivating successfully. Comrades, we're in the midst of a long slide to authoritarianism, which you know really very well in Berlin.